Hi, I'm Jim. Welcome to the UNBOUND Performance Podcast, where we explore the world of sports and performance mindset training.
And I'm Caroline. Each week, we talk about the strategies, habits, and mental framework that help us to excel. Let's get into today's episode. All right. Cat, welcome to the UNBOUND Performance Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
It's been a long time coming, I think.
I know.
We have our little list of guests.
Well, we
and
talked
you were,
about it
top of the list
months ago.
I know. Well, and I knew about this before it was a this.
I was gonna say I actually was gonna look for the text from Freeman when he was like, "Hey, remember Cat Horton?" And I was like, "Yeah." Were you okay with what I sent her about what to talk about?
I guess.
Well,
Yeah.
I hope so because you didn't give me time to prepare anything else.
You didn't read the books?
No.
As an original OG supporter of the UNBOUND Performance Podcast,
Sporting her sweatshirt.
I was
it
so
was
excited.
only right
I was
to
so
have you on
excited.
here.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Figure we could give a little rundown of who
Easily.
the heck she is to us and let her tell
Yes.
who the heck she is, and then ride from there.
Well, for me, she played on our two undefeated back-to-back state championship teams, 1999-2000, right?
No. Yes.
Yeah, 99-2000.
No. 2000, 2001. I graduated.
That sounds
I don't
right.
know.
No, it's 99-2000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
He
all-
knows every date of
I
everything
don't know
ever.
why
Don't
we
ever
needed.
question him
I
on
don't know
dates
why
or
we needed
scores.
to just put dates out there.
She was
though.
only 7.
Thank you. That. Yeah, it's a phenom. Just.
Yeah, those were just tremendously fun teams to coach and just hang out with. I mean, it was a blast.
It was really fun.
And then re-upped really during youth sports, Wake Forest Rec League baseball, and I look over, it's like, what?
Yes.
And there she is. So yeah, we kind of more officially reconnected that way. You'll have to tell me how you two connected.
I did play with her sister Phoebe. We were on the same team
That's
for I
right.
think we had 1 year overlap.
That's right.
But because you were so fresh out, it was like you were sort of like that's Phoebe's sister. It is what it is. And then, I mean, we went to find a way together. We worked out at the gym together. It was
Yeah.
sort of random. We showed up one day and I was like, "Hey, girl, hey," but just stayed in touch that way. And same thing, like a original supporter of the podcast, which we greatly appreciate. We have a couple original people that have been really supportive from the start, and wanted to have you on here to just sort of talk about your story. I think youth sports is one that comes up a lot. Like if we're ever texting and you come up, it's something about baseball or your kids or.
And then you are a business owner.
Yeah,
Right.
I am. I am.
So I think we should talk some about the challenges of that.
yeah.
too.
There's so many angles to hit.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Well, I love it. I love it because it was funny when I reconnected with you at youth sports. I talk about you quite a bit as a coach, especially now that we're in youth sports. I obviously grew up playing. Travel was very, very different back in
I was gonna say,
my day.
talking to you about what your
yeah.
teenage growing up volleyball sports was versus mine versus his versus today is so crazy how different.
Oh, it's
it
nuts.
is.
I love to see it, and sometimes I'm also like, oh man, that is a lot of clubs and options. But no, I started playing volleyball when I was 10. My dad played in a pickup outdoor volleyball game, and I remember at JC Park, and I remember I was like, Dad, can you put me in? He's like, yeah, sure. So they put me in, and I shanked it up and over the fence, into huge holly bushes, and I had to walk of shame, go get the ball. And I was like, Dad, I want to play volleyball. I don't ever want that to happen again. That was the start of my career. And so he's like, well, I play pickup with some of these guys, and one of them's a coach. And it was WCVC, Wake County Volleyball Club. It was your only option. I think there was only one team, and it was a 14s team, and I was 10. And I was like, let's go.
Good
I
luck,
could
kid.
run under the net without ducking, full blown, no adjustments needed. And I got in with this group of girls, and really we played together through high school, club wise, until they graduated. But WCVC, then 4 of our parents, Lindsay the Skedlers, and 2 others, they're like, we need something bigger, more competitive. These girls are really into it, and so that's where Club Raleigh was created. And then from there, the triangles and the
I think CCVC was the next one after that.
yeah,
and it was,
maybe.
kind of evolved.
Oh
from
yeah,
there.
because I'm trying to even remember what Phoebe played for.
I think she played CCVC.
Yes.
That was my first club.
Yes.
And that was my first connection with her because it
Yes.
was right before I went to Gibbons. And I was like, oh, we're on the same team together.
Yeah, but that's how I got kind of intro to Gibbons volleyball. I went to Broughton. I was
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I started there, and I was on the varsity team as a freshman, again with a lot of the girls that I played with on my club team.
And then Gibbons recruited her.
Yeah, I mean that cost a lot of money.
Yeah, I was expensive.
Yeah.
No, I had to do a whole presentation for my parents as to why I should go to Gibbons.
Good PowerPoint.
And yeah, pretty much. But I had to make it not all about the athletics, but it was mostly about the athletics. But yeah, Broughton was not. I played. It was just not for me. It wasn't my favorite. I didn't connect with the coach very well. And then, my sophomore year, I missed tryouts because I was at a leadership conference. So I got put on JV, and I remember just being so like mad, mad about it. And the conversation was, well, you've got to show that you deserve to be moved to varsity. I was like, okay. So I
You mean the same varsity I was on last year?
Yeah.
And played. I mean, it wasn't like I was on it and didn't play. But I remember thinking,
Wait,
like,
you were
okay,
on varsity and then you made JV?
sophomore year. And so I just remember like, okay, and like I played my tail off. I worked, you know, like I was there early. I stayed late. I did all the things. And none of that was working. So finally I can remember oh my gosh, I got yelled at so bad. I was like, well, maybe they want me to like help like coach the other girls. Like,
Don't overstep your bounds there.
well, I did.
Right.
I was like, I don't know what else to do. But man, my coach ripped me off the court, yelled at me so much. And I was like, I don't know what else you want. Like, you're telling me to do all these things. I'm doing it. This is the only other thing I haven't done. I didn't like it either. And then I think I was moved up to varsity the next day.
So weird.
It wasn't my favorite. Also, just school-wise and socially, it wasn't my favorite place. But so I played club with several girls that went to Gibbons and got to go and like do some open gyms. And I was like, I'm in. And this was before the new school was even built. So this was at old Gibbons. And I was even like, yeah, I'm still in. Like, let's do this. So my first year was the first year the new school opened.
Right.
I transferred in as a junior. Yeah.
You just prove your dates there.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, right, like I said, 99.
I only know when I graduated. That's literally like
I don't know,
everything.
like the season with it being a fall season.
Yeah,
always threw me off.
the
I'm
2
like,
the 2 years. I don't know. It's a lot to remember.
It's complicated.
It is. But all of that to say, wow, I went on a real tangent there. All of that to say, I talk about you as a coach quite a bit, especially now that my kids are in youth sports, because man, there are some really bad coaches in youth sports. I do think we have been pretty fortunate. We've had some really good ones. But some, I just remember I would talk to parents. I'm like, one of my favorite coaches, I have two that really stick out. It's you and then Craig Tagami, who coached at State. And then he actually was my club coach for a couple years. I don't know how we worked that with college. I don't know how we worked that, but they made it work. But he was one of my very favorites. And what I was telling the parents is, you don't have to be this yelling in your face, negative person,
scream
coach.
the result,
yeah. You also don't have to be the end all be all know it all, like the best of that sport. And that was my favorite thing about you. Again, I came in as a junior. You had been coaching, I think you guys already had 2 state champions. One. Yeah. So I mean, you were doing very well, obviously, but my favorite part was that you were like, yeah, I wasn't a volleyball player. It wasn't my sport. I didn't really know anything about it. They came to me one day and said, we need a coach. I said, okay. And I went to the library and checked out every book there was about volleyball, and I read it. And that came across in your coaching. You were very knowledgeable of the game, but at the same time, at least when I was there, you were also willing to say, like, I also know that half our team played on the same club team. We had our own play, like we had our own stuff. So you would also be like, you guys know what you're doing. I'm going to hold you to an expectation if you're not meeting that expectation. But you weren't ever like, I know better. This is what you should do. Your ego didn't get in the way of your coaching is how I felt. And I see that so much in youth sports now. I'm just like, oh man, that is such a you focused or a me focused kind of mentality. And it just, especially for these young kids, it just doesn't serve them very well. So when we would sit and watch the kids play baseball, we would have many conversations about all of that. So, and yeah, you and I met back up at the gym, and that was fun. But I felt the same way as you. I was like, it's Caroline.
Right.
I don't know if we actually like knew each other, but
right.
but we didn't. So we just sort of picked right up.
Yeah, those first 3 state championships. I mean, I have said this before, but when a bunch of those kids walked in the gym the first time, I was like, I'm not a good enough coach to coach players. And so that held true for the 2 years you were there. And I don't know, it never occurred to me to not tap into what you knew, what you guys were running, what you thought, your experienced players with really good athletic character. So I don't know, I just thought it was a collaboration basically.
But I think that's the difference, because you say, like, I saw this talent come in and I thought I'm not a good enough coach for that. I think that's that kind of imposter syndrome that we all talk about, or there's different aspects where we all feel that way, but it's how you handle it. A lot of people will say, oh, I don't think I'm a good enough coach for that. like
Sure.
watch me
Yeah, they pump it up a little
overcompensate.
bit,
Yeah.
right,
And I'm going to
yeah.
really I'm going to yell at them more, or they're never going to be, I'm going to constantly berate them and tell them all the things they're bad at because they're so good. And that wasn't how you responded. You were tough. I mean, I'm not going to say that it was all like sunshine and rainbows. But before I even knew that that's what you were doing, I picked up on that you were leaning into the collaboration side of that, of not feeling, or at least not showing that you felt any sort of
Superiority or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I think too, like especially in youth sports in those higher levels where you acknowledge you had a team of knowledgeable, talented athletes, when you come in and try to overpower them versus supporting them and saying like, I see that you have done the work to get to where you are, that's a whole different dynamic than someone coming in, like you said, sort of like puffing their chest up and trying to always be at that superior type level, because those kids got to where they were for a reason, whether it was other coaches or parent support or just their own hard work. And if you try to come in and overpower that, you just tamp them down in a way that might actually limit them from continuing on. And I think that's really important. And like you said, I think even at that young age, playing for him, like it was not talked about of how this dynamic worked, but you could feel it. And I think at that young age too, I didn't really realize what it was, but looking back now, it was that very collaborative, equal partnership. Like we're all in this together. We might have a different title and you might be on the court and I'm on the sideline, but we all have the same common goal and we're all going to put in what we have to contribute and see how it works out together.
Yeah. And, I mean, I remember watching something with Coach K and the Olympic basketball team, and I'm not like Freeman. I'm not going to go back and tell you the date of the interview and who said it, but somebody was commenting on his ability to take all of these stars, these individual stars, and create a team out of it. And I think that is really huge. And that's one of the things, my oldest plays baseball. It's obviously it's a team sport, but it's also very individual in moments. But I see so many, especially at the young, like 9, 10, 11, they're like, oh, this kid he's got it. And so they focus all on this one kid to the detriment of the other ones, but also to the detriment of that kid. Yeah. Either they're going to set such high expectations for themselves forever, or they're going to think like, oh yeah, I made it. Like I don't really need to work any harder. Yeah. Like I am in. And you build this star mentality. And I see it, you'll see it in every sport, basketball, even just at the rec level. There's the one kid that's really good that they, maybe the coaches never take out. Drives me up, doesn't drive me up the wall. It infuriates me because it's not fair to that kid either. Yep. But you see it everywhere. So, the thing with Coach K of being able to say like, yeah, you're taking all these legit superstars. They're making gazillions of dollars. They don't need to, they don't have to do anything that you're telling them to do. But something about him as a coach made them want to play together as a team and sort of leveled out the playing field, if you will. But that was similar to ours. I felt like everybody felt like they had a part in it.
Yeah, that was a truly dominant group too. I mean, it was rally scoring was not a thing yet. So I remember that first year you were there, our average set score was 15-3.
Yeah,
which is
some of them were painful. It was
and I remember before we started, we had a scrimmage against a really, really good team from the year before that was returning everyone. And we were kind of like, I was having a somewhat tricky time getting your attention because I think you thought that no matter what, we'll just steamroll whoever's in our way. And
I wouldn't think that.
So I remember saying, I said, I can't wait till you go over there and scrimmage this team because with this attitude, they're going to kick your you-know-whats.
Yeah.
And so we go over there.
There's that tough love you were talking about.
That is not what happened. Like, that was one of those teams, like, they had the ability to, like, flip a switch, and which is extremely unusual. And that team, you guys just laid waste to them. And, I mean, I can still remember standing in the gym looking at all their parents who were, like, in shock. Because we still weren't, like, super on the radar where everybody around knew who we were. This was year 2 of this run. And I remember thinking, like, well, they shoved that in my face.
Or what you said worked.
And, well, I that was when I knew that this was not a normal group of kids in the best way. Like, I remember I won't say who they were, but they were a great team and had been state finalists the year before, and we were piling the van, and I was trying to tell you guys who we were. You guys didn't even know who they were. Didn't even care. And I'm thinking, like, this is going to be a formidable test. Same thing happens. We go in there and sweep, like, okay.
Just kidding.
They just didn't, I don't know. It didn't matter who was in the way. And they were just rough, tough. Looking back over these years, I always thought it was like coaching a bunch of sailors. Like, they just were, I don't know, fearless, relentless, extremely competitive. And then, so the next year, that first year you were there, we were really a charmed existence. Somebody got hurt. And,
Yeah.
So then everybody's senior year, lots of injuries and adversity to overcome. And by then we were like a marked group too.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody was ready for us. And do you remember that match at Wesleyan?
Oh, yes.
That was crazy.
My parents, my dad still loves to remind me of one specific moment in that match when my competitiveness maybe took over a little bit more than my team mentality, and I yelled at one of our players. But yes, I very, very vividly remember that match.
Yeah, we had people hurt, some people playing hurt. I remember one of the players was having a migraine, not told me until after the first 2 sets, which we'd lost.
Yeah.
Can I go get some medicine? Like, I can't see. I'm like, by all means.
Yeah,
like, go
please,
get some.
please do.
So the whole town was there screaming, and we're down 2 sets. And I remember in the huddle before the 3rd set, I'm just looking, and the looks in all your eyes was so like, okay, I really probably don't need to say much. And out you went.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember those last 3 sets, but they were like, whoa.
I do. I can remember the gym. I mean, I remember it's this, old. It wasn't tiny, but it was,
Right.
The yellow wood and just kind of felt closed in. And you're right. The entire town came out. Like, there was not an empty seat. They had their student section. Like, they had
Local
posters.
news was there.
Yeah. I mean, it was insane.
Was it the state final match?
No.
No.
Regular season.
Yeah, it was regular season, and but it came because of that. It I remember there being this level of pressure that I hadn't felt before, because again, sometimes we would miss a serve on purpose just so that the other team could get the ball to some of those games were. It almost
I think
made
that continued
me,
for about 8 years beyond your time too.
Yes, it did, and it wasn't even fun because you wanted to really let loose, but this one, it kind of caught us off guard, and we were. We got punched in the mouth just a little bit, but I remember kind of that moment where we were like, oh, okay, we're not playing around anymore, and every single one of us, for the most part, had this competitor switch that flipped, and it just took on this life. But every point was a battle. I do remember that. I wish I remember the name of the outside hitter that would always, I said all the way around, I am not gifted in the height department, so as a blocker, not gonna provide a whole lot of defense there. And I wish I'd remember her name because I saw her all over, but she wasn't all that tall either, but she could jump through the roof, and she would just smoke it over me every time, down the line. That's when I yelled at, I hope she doesn't remember this. I hope she's not as traumatized as my parents say she is. But I remember she's just going right over me. So I'm feeling like it's my fault. Yeah. But so I turned around and I was like,
defenders?
You don't get on the line, get off my court. And my dad was like, and even now, he'll every now and then if I'm acting or if I say something, he's like, oh, do you need me to get off your court? I'm like, oh gosh. But it was just that overwhelming competitiveness and desire to not let the team down, not let, coach down. But once you start building this foundation and record, it's terrifying. I remember Phoebe saying she came in as a freshman, sophomore year, a lot of us, a good hunk of us graduated out. And I remember that first year, Phoebe was like, this is terrifying. And
it was such fragile ground to walk on.
Yeah.
You felt like if you stepped on the wrong crack, man, you let the entire freaking city, you let the Pope down.
Yes.
My God.
Yeah.
It really
the brothers
did.
were going to just it was going to be terrible. But I remember thinking I only felt that in small moments, in certain games. And I
but also in the best way.
Yeah, it was so good.
In a very prideful way, but also oh God, we cannot screw this up.
Yes, exactly. But I think because we were on the front end, we for the most part got to really enjoy just the we were really dominating everything, and this is super fun. And it was a fun group. It was a really fun group of girls.
A lot of personality, for sure.
Yes.
But I think that's a huge part of why you guys were able to play so well under whatever circumstances. But that was some real toughness, that 2000 season, where just every time we turn around, something else was somebody's in a car accident, or
Yeah.
somebody's sick, or it was something.
Or somebody gets hurt playing in the Powder Puff game and can't set for the conference
I remember
tournament.
that.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Who was the setter at that point?
I don't know.
You said someone. I wasn't sure.
I don't know. Yeah, no, that was me.
I know, like the whole other.
We weren't
team
allowed to
landed
play.
on
We
top
weren't
of
allowed
you.
to by the time it came
That's
around.
my fault.
Yeah.
That's my fault.
Absolutely. I said,
Just
well,
totally
live and
okay.
learn on that one.
Yeah. And I remember my best friend came in to take over. Like, she normally played outside, or she'd play right side. And Freeman's like, you have to set. She's like, what? And I remember she, like, I'm sitting on, this is for the conference, like the conference tournament. So it's just, a couple days. And so I was out the whole thing. And I remember when we won, she burst into tears because she was just like, that was so scary. Like, I can't believe I had to do that. And, but it was a team of resilience. Like,
Yep.
regardless of what happened, somebody would step in. And that was also really cool that you've got, there's some positions that are really kind of specific, and that you've got
That's one of
somebody-
them.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Well, I think too that, like, in your comment about yelling at her, like, get on the line or get off my court, like, sure, that might have been maybe in the moment an aggressive way to put it, but like that, if you're not tall enough to block that girl, then yeah, your defenders have to get their butts on the line and do that. And so I think it also just sort of speaks to, like, I would say I think volleyball is one of the most team-oriented sports there is. Like, you cannot have one single superstar.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. And that sort of like grinded out competitive mentality got you to have your teammates step up. And sometimes that's hard for high schoolers to do, is to tell their teammate to, like, hey, get your together, or you to take fault and be like, hey, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so I need you guys to rally around me.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to that competitive spirit, just that ability to sort of really come together as one.
Yeah.
Because 5 doesn't cut it on a volleyball court.
No, and you'll find your weakest link really quickly. And again, my son plays baseball, so that's a different vibe altogether. It kind of, I had to learn that sport. Really, it wasn't one of my favorites. And then my youngest has tried all the things. We still haven't really found what sports might not be his thing, but he tries them all, and so we're learning all of those. But I lean into my playing days and my coaching days with my oldest, where I'm just like, baseball, it's a game of errors, so you're going to screw up all the time, more times than you're not. But you've also got a little bit of a buffer. Like, you screw up and it's, you've got some room to make up
no clock.
for it, right? You got room to make up for
Well,
it.
you making out, there's somebody behind you.
Yeah.
Oh, there's more innings.
Yeah. It's not, volleyball is very in that moment, and yeah, like, if you're just going to hit it over in one play, then that's not volleyball. So you've got to have, it's very, very team focused. And I think that's why you need coaches that are able to bring out the best in each of the players and make them play for each other rather than for themselves. And I think that's harder to do than it seems like it should be.
Yeah, I think having coached baseball, you can get away with having some kids on the team that, like, people don't like.
Yeah.
One of the best baseball teams I coached, we had a couple of kids, and I mean, everybody else couldn't stand them. I didn't like them.
Yeah.
But they were good. And they played, but it didn't break the rhythm or whatever. But like in volleyball, where it's such a, like, rhythm, momentum kind of feel-good sport, having one or two out there who everybody can't stand or you don't get along with or whatever, that makes it much more difficult, I think, to pull off.
Yeah, it's very obvious. It's almost like a light shines, like, oh, that one doesn't blend very well. So that's challenging. And now it's interesting to see. I have friends with daughters that are in the travel volleyball space, and my niece plays, and there are so many choices, like clubs to go to, and we're seeing it on the baseball side too. But it becomes this challenge of, kind of watering down the talent levels. It's hard, and then finding enough coaches. These clubs are
Quality
huge.
coaches.
Yeah, they're just massive, and finding enough coaches that can coach in a way that's that teaches the kids and isn't a reflection on the coach. I think that's the biggest thing, is that so many people, coaches and parents, I think that's the biggest issue with youth sports, is like, well, if my team's not doing well or my kid's not doing well, obviously that's a reflection on me as a parent or as a past player or whatever. And that's where it becomes even more personal. It's personal enough that it's your kid, but when you make it about you, that's when it becomes the really negative yelling and the parents kind of showing their rear ends. I feel like it's almost always about them versus the kid.
Well, yeah, that's huge. No, you go ahead.
Well, on your comment about, like, it being kind of watered down, like you said, when you played, there was like one club, then there were two. By the time I got there were 3.5 kind of deal.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, you know, it used to be that, you know, travel sports was like only for certain types of players.
Elite, a little bit more elite. Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, by no means am I trying to say like, let's cut all the kids out who aren't like the very best of the best. However, like you said, it waters it down some competition wise. It waters it down maybe the value, the impact that those kids feel they bring and the effort that they've put in. It was like when I started seeing there be, you know, 4 and 6 and 8 and 10 different clubs, and then each club has black team, blue team, white team, bronze team, gray team, yellow team, purple team, pink team. Like, does everybody get a spot? Again, it borders the line of like, you know, does everybody get a participation ribbon? I think it just creates this expectation that like, if you're going to play volleyball, we'll stay in that world, that you have to go play for this club or you have to play travel. It creates this level of needing to be like everybody else when the reality is like, it's okay to play just because you love it.
Well, and that's the piece that it hurts my heart the most is you almost can't play sports for the fun of it anymore.
Right.
Even at 5, they've got travel teams or teams that you're paying a lot of money for your 5-year-old to play. And listen, I've seen some 5-year-olds that can smack a baseball,
but can they still at 12 or 15 or 18? Like, and that's
or
what
do
we set
they
them up
want
for.
to? Or
right.
do they want to?
Right.
And that was for me is, and we were really cognizant of that with Cole. You know, I told Freeman, you know, he started when he was 9, I think, and looking back on it, it was kind of a bit of a like, oh, well, we're playing, you know, t-ball, and hey, that coach said he'd love to have my kid on. Yeah, obviously he's an athlete,
right?
Of course you do. So there was definitely a little bit of like a pride,
and
push
rightfully so. Like you can't ignore those feelings.
Yeah. But so, you know, then we get into the team, and we had some studs on our team, and some of them are still very much studs, and they are really, really good into high school. And then some are either not playing, or some got onto teams where the talent level was more even, and it kind of shook their confidence. But I feel like I saw that starting in volleyball when I was still coaching, you know, so college a little bit after, was you just see these girls getting in young, which is great because sports saved me. Like being on a sports team kept me out of trouble.
Yep.
I was more worried about letting my coaches down if I got caught, you know, at a party or something, almost more worried about them than my parents.
100%.
And you know, my mom and dad and I talked about that all the time. Like if I had gone to a party and Tagami had found out, I would have been heartbroken because he would have been disappointed in me, and that was the worst, the worst possible thing. But like what a blessing that is. What a great thing to have is this thing that I'm really passionate about, but not just because of accolades I get or whatever, but because like it makes me actually want to be a better human. And I you know, you all these baseball teams, you hear these coaches and they're like, we're going to teach them how to be great men, and I love that. I would love for that to be the case. It's not always, you know, a lot of times it's kind of become this, you know, I worry sometimes it's a bit of a money grab. I worry sometimes that, you know, everybody wants to make the rules, so they make their own club, which to be fair is what we did when we created Club Raleigh. So, you know, pot kettle. But I want kids to be able to play for fun, and you can't, even in the rec leagues, it's over the top.
When you throw a 5-year-old on what is considered an elite team and you create that environment for them, and then at 10 they're like not into it anymore, then they feel like they like didn't cut it.
Yeah.
Like I've been in situations with friends who played volleyball, and someone like, just example, someone will be like, oh, you played in college? I'm like, yeah. And then they'll say, oh, did you play too? You're like, oh, I only played till high school.
Yeah.
As if that's like a discounted version of what they did. They could have played at Gibbons, you know, and won 4 state championships, but because they didn't continue on beyond that, oh, I only did that. And I think that just creates this, like, again, watering down of what you did. And I think it's the sooner we create this heightened expectation and level of like identity in your sport, that if you step away from it, you've let somebody down or yourself down, or you quit, or you couldn't cut it. And I think that's just really, really bad for kids in their early teens.
You want it to be an extension of who you are, not the end all be all of who you are.
Well, and that's where I think having a lot of different clubs and those opportunities is a good thing, because not every kid is going to go play at a Big Ten school. And some of it is you have to have won the genetic lottery to be able to play at that level. But I think the things that you can learn and qualities you can develop by playing sports are many and very valuable. So I think that's, if we're in the youth sports world, whether it's scholastic sports or travel, pay to play, that should be a foundational for what we're trying to do for kids, is create
that environment
where they can become the kind of people that, you know, we would all hope they could become. And that's our job as coaches. And
I think that's a very important point. Like, so long as the coaches at
That-
every
yeah.
level, and I think that's where, like, maybe my comment about too many teams is, getting oil and watery with yours, but so long as you get that quality level of coach and support at all those levels. But if it's just a matter of how many teams can we create to charge as many parents as possible, and let's just fill the slots of coaches, that's where I run into an issue.
Yeah, no, that's I agree that if you're going to coach, then you have to give it everything you've got, and I think you have to have a fully formed sense of why you're doing this. And I mean, when I started coaching, I didn't have a fully formed sense of it. I was trying, I'd never really seen high quality coaching personally, so I'm reading books and studying great leaders and great coaches and looking around, and it was, I had a lot to learn, and but there I am, like year one, I'm coaching a varsity high school baseball team, and I was lucky because one, those kids were so into it, and the coaches I had with me, they were great. They taught at the school, Boyce Collins and Sean Curtis. They were awesome, and they were so into it, and it was intense. We had a great year, but I had so much to learn in terms of becoming a head coach that really knew what he was doing. And then you throw volleyball on top of it, which is like learning a foreign language. I had never seen a game. So, when you're talking about, like, when you guys were in our gym, why wouldn't I tap into what you guys knew and the high quality coaching you've been receiving playing travel? That, I don't know. I think that's just, it's not fair to the kids. Like, you're supposed to be there to model certain things. There I got a chance to model humility. But that was, I don't know, it wasn't even a decision I made. It was just how I saw it, and it was easy and felt very natural to do that. With the whole idea of, I don't know, I kind of was lucky that I instinctively wanted to connect with players. I wanted them to know I cared about them. It was fun. Like, coaching high school kids was fun. But also wanting to see them learn and grow and experience all these great things that sports could provide. And if I thought that could only happen through, me being the wellspring of all knowledge, and well, that's just not true. And I don't care at what level. I've talked to plenty of coaches at, the pro level, the major Division I level. Like, they're always collaborating and, finding out, like, what do you think? Why isn't this working? What do you think would work? And I think that makes it all so much more interesting as well. Like, it's just that's a fun environment to be in when we're all kind of pushing each other and learning from each other. So I had a lot to learn for sure back then, but it was exciting for me. I was learning new plays. And we were running plays that, sometimes we were running plays that, nobody else around was running.
Yes.
And I remember it was your first year there, and I can't remember where we were playing, but it was just crazy, the offense we were running. And I had a college coach after the match come up to me. He's like, where do you come up with that stuff? Like, and I remember pointing, said, it's all them. Like, they can do it, so we do it. And it's fun to watch. And he just shook his head like, wow. But that's how it was, for sure. It was a legit team with very experienced, talented players. So I don't know. I think that I think my virtue is that you guys knew I cared about you as people and enjoyed being your coach.
Yeah. I think a big piece was of that and still that. And what I see in coaches where I'm like, wow, you can tell that's a good coach, is because you're able to kind of put any sense of, ego or pride in a selfish sort of way aside. What I see now, which is really interesting, again, because we have all these teams, and so they are bringing in lots of coaches that are maybe still playing in college or young, super young. Some are awesome, and some you can see that are just fully into encouraging the girls and positivity and all this stuff. And then some are very, very negative or very incentive based. Either if you're not doing well, I'm yanking you out first play. Like I'm not even going to give you the chance to get your head right. And I think a lot of that probably comes from how they were coached in their younger years. If you have a coach that is able to put you first or your team first, or set the expectation that this is how we're going to do it, and then hold you to those expectations, that modeled behavior is going to carry with you through if you were to coach, or even into your career. I talk with my kids all the time about the lessons that they're learning in sports and how that applies to the workforce all the time. My oldest is probably sick of it because I'll turn anything around into like, yeah, but here's what I'm teaching you.
That's where I would probably want you two to steer this conversation next, is like things you learned that worked, didn't work as athletes, and then what that looks like moving forward, like business,
how it applies in just the real world. I mean, for me, one, learning how to work with people, with other people, teamwork, even people that maybe I don't love to be around, just kind of learning how to deal with different personalities and how to kind of control my emotions if it's not necessarily a positive response. Same with coaches. Like I say, a good coach is just as informative and shaping as a bad coach, as long as you can realize that it's a bad coach. I had some bad coaches and I learned quite a bit from them. Same with bosses. I've had some really terrible bosses. And I probably learned more from them than I did from my great bosses, because it's a lot easier to say, oh, I want to make sure I don't do that. And you can write a book on it. But I say the same to my kids. I say the same to, friends, kids that are playing and maybe have a tough coach or, a situation that's not what they would want. One, yeah, sorry, you're not always going to get what you want. Two, sometimes other people can see differently and maybe they are right. Maybe you don't need to be playing. So sorry, like that's really hard. But if you can recognize like, okay, yeah, I'm on the bench. I don't want to be here. I can either just whine about it or cry to my parents and tell them to go talk to the coach, which is never a good idea. Or I can put my head down and say, okay, this is not where I want to be. This is, what do I need to do to get there? It's the same in school. It's the same in business. It's just a skill that if you can learn and do well in, it will serve you well into the future. But for me, the big part was learning how to interact with people. It's a confidence builder, how to talk to people. That's always a great skill. I don't know if you've probably got.
Yeah, I mean, ditto to everything you just said. And I'm thinking like the building a thick skin, and not always in a way where you need to have a thick skin to be able to receive criticism. Mm-hmm. Sure, that's important. You need to be able to, especially in a coaching world, it is their job to tell you like what's right, what's wrong, how to fix things. So you have to be able to receive that feedback, which 100% translates to the work world, right? Like you and I both own our own business now, so we can kind of do our own thing. Yeah. But when you first step into the world from college or wherever your last step of school is before the real world, you're not in charge. Someone else is in charge of you, and you need to be able to receive that and learn where you fit in, what you can contribute. But also, like I hate throwing out cliches, but like iron sharpens iron, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can be the person who can take constructive feedback or constructive criticism, whatever you want to call it, and do something with it, mm-hmm. but also encourage other people to be that person that like, hey, I might not be the boss, but we're on the same team. And so I see that this is not working for you or for the team. So I'm going to have the guts to say something to you about it and step in and give you that advice or whatever it is, can make such an impact on other people. Mm-hmm. I was very much raised to like, I mean, my mom still says it to this day, like state your needs. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. I have a lot of people that I know who I'm very close to in my life that will be like, God, like, whatever happened, and I'm not really sure why. And I'm always like, did you ask? Mm-hmm. And, well, no. Well, why not? Like, why would you not? If you think someone has a problem with you and you want to fix it, why wouldn't you ask them? Also, when you don't ask questions, you look like an idiot. If someone criticizes you and you don't show them the effort to like, how can I fix this for you? Yeah. Well, they're just going to keep expecting that you're just like not the person that's going to ever step up to the plate. Mm-hmm. And so being able to receive the feedback, give the feedback, and be dynamic in both worlds, I think to me was hugely helpful, because when you, like I said, when you first step out of, and I've used this example 100 times in this podcast, so I won't dive deep in again, but when I first stepped into the real world where I had a boss, which is similar to a coach, but not quite the same, money is literally on the line at this point, right? Being able to like separate what I think is happening from what's actually happening, from my emotions and their emotions. Like I carried the weight of all of that for so long, thinking that like, what are they wondering? What are they thinking? Did I do this right? Yeah. And finally one day I just decided, if there's a problem, they'll tell me. If it's good enough for them to praise me, they'll praise me. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not sure, I'm going to ask. Yeah. And that was a huge turning point in my career, in my relationships, in my ability to now be able to do things that I'm doing. I mean, I left that job, which I thought I never, ever, ever would. And it gave me the clear vision to be able to make a change. And now I'm doing things like this and starting my business with my husband and like all of these things that if I hadn't experienced being an athlete and receiving that, being a college athlete where you have to manage your schedule and everybody else's, like that's a job in itself. I'm 100% sure I wouldn't have the stomach to be able to have taken the risks that I've taken, probably similar for you, to get to where we're sitting here doing this today.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, my mom would always say, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. I am not always great about that. But I, you know, the boys and I talk about it quite a bit. I was telling a friend of mine, I joke that I'm going through a midlife parenting crisis, not a midlife crisis, but I'm realizing my kid's a freshman in high school. My other one's in 7th grade.
Yeah.
I only have so much, I only have so much time with them left. And so I like find myself in these panic moments of going, you know, have I imparted enough of these things that, yeah, maybe I'm sure my parents felt the same way when I was in high school. It's like you try, but are you? And then a lot of it you just have to figure out on your own. A lot of that for me, I figured out through sports, which that was a big one, you know, of you're not always going to please everybody. Yep. You're not always going to be the best. For me, that was hard. I was athletic, just naturally athletic my whole life. That sophomore year when, you know, they put me on JV was really the first time I ever had to like try hard, and it threw me for a total loop. But that was really, really good for me. I see that in my oldest. He is naturally athletic. If he picks something up, he gets it. But I can remember that, you know, okay, I remember when I hit the pitfalls of that, of just leaning into my skill versus my, you know, the effort. We talk about the grit and perseverance and all of that. And then you've got my youngest, who is not as athletically gifted, but he loves the team. So he's out there. He is the best teammate. He is not going to be the best guy on the court or on the field, but man, like it, I get like goosebumps when I get to watch him go out and do his thing, because he just,
that's awesome.
He just, you know, and like everybody's cheering for him to do something great on the, you know, he played baseball. His team was awesome. They were like undefeated, you know, and B would get up there. He didn't have a hit. He had some hits, but hadn't had one in a very, very, very long time. He tries best to do all the things. And it's like the last game, I think, maybe second to last game. And he just hits a bomb, like out of nowhere. The whole place goes up, like loses their mind. Parents love him because everybody is pulling for him, because he's there for the team. He's in it for the group. And I love that so much, but I want to encourage that. I don't ever want him to feel this like disappointment.
He's got whatever. Both of your kids have a gift, and they're just very different ones.
It's exactly that. It's exactly that. And it's funny because I see some parents where that's the same, and they're like trying to force the athletics on. And so I say to my youngest, to Beckett all the time, I'm like, dude, you don't have to do anything sports related. Like if that's not your thing, totally fine. I want you to do something because I want, you need that interaction, the challenge of it. I want you to do something, but it doesn't have to be sports. But in telling them that, Beckett tries very, very hard. Cole doesn't have to try as hard. And that was me. And that was one of the, I had to really overcome that. And it was kind of like, wait a minute, everything isn't always just easy for me. Like that sucks.
That's such a good point though. Cause I was similar. My brother and I sound very similar to your kids. Was like, I mean, by no means I think people didn't like me, but like my brother was just like, everybody loved him. Yeah. And he was a pain in the ass, man. Like I was jump roping on a pogo stick at 4. Like first time I went skiing, I went to the black diamond. My parents were like, what? And they expected me to like sit my butt. Like I went straight down. Like you're supposed to kind of do this, right? And I'm just like, I'm going for it. And my brother was, also very athletic, but like he got in trouble, right? But his senior year of high school got suspended like 2 weeks before graduation. And my parents were like, is he going to walk at graduation? Like my mom was, and to this day talking about it, you can see her like sweating. I was like, are people going to like boo him? The whole freaking place cheered their butts off because everyone loved my brother. Yeah. Like, sure, he made some dumb high school mistakes, but like parents, teachers, like everyone's just like hooting and hollering because the kid walked across the stage, right? But my parents fostered those. They like, I mean, my brother was actually very athletic and still is, but at the time, clearly sports was my path, and he was actually very academically gifted. Didn't have to try for anything. God, it was the worst. We had a class together in college. This is so unrelated, but we had a class together in college, econ, and it was like my worst subject and his best. And I took furious notes in that class, and he sat there like this the whole class. And he aced it. And he, like, so I would take the final exam, and he texted me, and he's like, what did you get on Mastashari's econ exam? And I was like, an 88.
Pumped.
And Paul's like, damn. I got like a 54, and I'm like, he switched our freaking grades. I knew what.
No.
Oh yeah. Like I'm pumped that I got like a high 80, which for him was still not a good grade. For he thought he was gonna get like 100. They switched our grades, and my mom was a college professor, or still is, and she was like, I would have honored and just like bumped you both up to the, like, that's not fair. But I stuck with the D. But again, I think like that's the thing in parenting, is that you have to see in your kids what they're good at. There's nothing wrong with maybe encouraging them and letting them try things, but seeing what is their natural state and just fostering the crap out of that.
Yeah.
Like supporting it.
And even
them,
if
like,
they don't find that until
Yeah.
forever down the road, like,
Yeah.
who knows? I am a corporate event planner. Never in any of my life planning or goals or school or
that
anything.
part of the plan?
Never.
Yep.
It just is how the cards fell, and it was something that I got to try, and I was like, oh wow, I'm actually pretty good at this.
Yeah.
And so that's what I say to Beckett all the time. I'm like, you don't have to find your thing. You will stick with, like, if we agree to go out on a team,
You'll see it to the end.
we're in it. We did tackle football this last year. I was not mentally. I'm a tough cookie. I feel like I was not mentally prepared to see my kid
Collide.
with much bigger kids. I felt like he was considered one of the bigs, but he was the smaller of the bigs, and some of these other teams had some big bigs, really big bigs. But he gets out there, and it was hard. It was really, really hard. And I remember, like, even part of me was gonna
We can quit this one.
stop.
This one's
We
okay.
can stop. And I had to, like, really all season. You can ask my husband. All season, I had to check myself to say, like, no. Even he was like, oh, I really don't want to go to practice, but I'm gonna go. And I was so proud. I was as proud of him as I was Cole, who's out there just doing awesome things. And it's the little things. But that's the piece. Like, Beckett's probably learning more life lessons because he's had more challenges and more obstacles than Cole, maybe because it's been kind of easy until middle school was challenging, and some disappointments started to set in, and that was probably one of the best things that could happen. But yeah, you don't have to figure it out yet, which
That's
the parents need to know too. Like, your kid doesn't
sure.
have to sign their life away to a sport at 5, 10, at 16,
At 15, yeah,
like
yep.
18, like.
It's cool that you have that. I want to make sure that I asked about, like, you went from a situation where you're working for other people. Sorry.
The creepy double hand on the screen.
It's like
It or thing or whatever.
Family. Yeah. You go from a situation where you're working for people. Like, talk about the mentality and how you managed to go from, like, kind of a safety net of working for other people to, like, boom, I'm it.
Yeah. So, again, like I said, event planning was never in the works for me. In all honesty, I was working at a pharmaceutical company as a temp. I just found that I needed a job and went through a temp agency. So I'm, like, doing all this admin stuff for a pharmaceutical company. They were like, hey, we'd like you to stay. We're going to hire you on full time. So I was just doing admin work. Like, I had no clue what I wanted to do. And another admin was doing kind of their meeting planning. As we grew as a company, she needs some help. So I was like, yeah, I'll help. So it was literally just, I came on board as an extra pair of hands. Realized I really liked it and really liked the human interaction part. Like, I'm really good on site. But so, long story short, it turned in from just doing it on the side to that was my role at the company. And I was happy to stay and do it forever. Like, I was more than happy where I was. Those were also some of my most challenging boss leader interactions. I learned a ton at that job. I think I was there for 10, 12 years. We were bought by a bigger pharma company. They came in, pretty much everybody was immediately severed. I remember the absolute panic I felt because I was like, I've worked my way up here. Like, I have value in this company, but on paper,
Where does it go?
yeah, like how is this other company going to know that I'm really good? I was panicking. And so, the same company, the company that bought us, was like, well, do you want to come back on and get us through a couple more meetings? So come on as a contractor. I was like, yes, I'll do whatever. Like, yes, I will stay. But I remember they were like, okay, well, what's your hourly rate? I don't know. I've made a salary. So I asked somebody, again, this is where, like, you've got to have humility to be able to
It's hard
ask.
to define value.
Yeah. And so I asked, and she was like, you need to ask for more than you think. I was like, well, what do I think? No
Where's the
clue.
starting point for where I think?
Yeah, no clue. And again, it's similar with my business now, but so we came up with a number. I said, and they were like, yeah, sure. And I was like, dang, I should have gone for more. But so I did that, realized that the company that bought us was not a company that I wanted to work for. So I got them through that last meeting, and then I was like, nope, I'm going to take my severance and figure out my life, and I don't know what. And then one of my mentors, who is also a meeting planner, she does it, kind of third party. She said, Cat, you're going to leave. and here in about a week, someone is going to call you and they're going to say, can you plan this event for me? And you're going to say yes. And then you're going to call me and we're going to figure it out. I was like, okay, whatever. To the day, a week later, one of the VPs that had got, or, you know, one of the sales leaders that had gotten severed with me called and was like, hey, I'm at my new company. Can you plan our national sales meeting? Yep. Sure
Here's
can.
my new hourly rate.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I sure can. And then I called my mentor and I was like, I just said yes to this, you know, like hundreds of people national sales meeting that I'd never not had someone over me doing the planning. I was always kind of the second seat. Was really good at that. But I was like, I said yes. You told me to say yes. Now what am I doing? And she was great. She was like, here's well, what do you think? Here, you send me, like, you lay out the budget, send it to me, I'll look at it, but you do it. And she gave me permission to show that I knew what I was doing. I think I would have been very content to just stay where I was because it was safe and because I had someone telling, you know, kind of leading me and someone else that was accountable, like a level above me accountable. But so this kind of gave me the opportunity to say, like, okay, I actually do know what I'm doing. Here are some things that I actually don't know because I was never had to do it, and I get to learn it. And then, like, a week later, someone else called and said, you know, I need help planning this trip and this thing. And I didn't even have an intention to start my own business, but it kind of organically came to being. And it was all through networking, which again goes back to just being able to relate to people and create relationships and how you treat people. And it's one of the pillars of the company I built, and just me in general. Is it all really matters, and kind of how you make people feel. For me, it was the thick skin and just you know, there's a bit of fearlessness, and you can develop that in sports. Obviously, you're nervous, a big game or something like that. You've got feelings and emotions, but I think if you've got good coaching or a good team, you learn how to harness that and use it for good. And so I think that's another big piece that comes in. Half the time, I'm like, feel like I'm faking it till you make it,
but it works.
It works. Well, and everybody is doing that. And that's such an
underrated like skill to take advantage of.
Yeah. Nobody was born a CEO. Like, truly, one day somebody was just like, you know what? I think I'm a chief executive officer. And there became the CEO. Like, that's all job titles, all the things, they're all made up. Somebody just decided this is what I am, this is what I'm worth, this is what's going to happen. And if you can remember that and remind yourself of that, then when you're feeling that imposter syndrome or I don't really know what I'm doing, you can kind of go, well, we're gonna give it a shot. And same with sports. You also fail in sports, and you learn how to lose. Some of us better than others, but you learn how to deal with the negatives too, hopefully. And so you probably are going to screw up. For me, I learn the most out of the mistakes I make.
That's where you learn. Yeah.
100%. If I screw up on an event, I will guarantee you I will not make that one mistake. I will not make it again.
Well, your story reminds me of the title of this book that I really like. It's called Courage Before Confidence. And that's, you had some confidence that you could do this, but it took courage. Like, that's super interesting to me. Like, talk a little more about that.
Of just saying yes.
Yeah. Like, I'm all right. I'm going to go do this.
Yeah. I mean, again, for me, it came from a place of, I don't know what to do next. I don't know where this is going to go. So it came from a little bit of a place of fear. It came from a little bit of a place of, well, this is what I am really good at this. So there was an underlying level of confidence.
But the difference between doing it for a company and then
and then going, So again, I'd always thought about it. So I'm with this company. Had the opportunity, my boss, my initial boss left, had the opportunity to maybe take over that role, and I didn't try for it. And the person who took it was not a good situation. Probably one of the worst for me. And I remember most everybody at the company was like, why didn't you take that job? Why wasn't that your job? I was like, I didn't apply. I'm like, well, why not? I was like, well, I didn't know. I'm not really sure. And it was one of those things where I was like, man, that was a missed opportunity that only I held myself back from. That was purely me. So I think when we got bought, I got severed. It was another one of those opportunities. It's like, okay, well, I could just sit back. We had a pretty good severance package. Like, I can just sit back and, hang with the kids for a little bit and then hope for the best. Put my resume,
train rolling.
Yeah, put my resume back out there and, start at the bottom at another company and, just try to work my way up. Or I had toyed with the idea because we already worked with, some independent planners. I was like, oh, that would be pretty cool. Big dream, like big, put it out there. And I'm goal setting is not a natural thing for me. I don't love to do it. It's hard for me to get like really smart, goal setting. So my kids love it because I'm like, no, we're gonna make goals because I'm not good at it. But I remember thinking like, man, that would actually be really cool. This was before we got bought. So it was almost one of those where it's like, it's back there. And now, you're almost, if it's laid out in front of you, that would have 100% been all me if I had just, no, I'm going to go and apply for a new job. And so I leaned into it, had my own clients. I also did like contracting work for other third parties. So it was great. First while was awesome. COVID hit, everything came to a screeching halt. Post COVID, it kind of got back into it. And I was honestly realizing that I didn't love it as much. I was traveling a ton. I was missing a lot of time with my kids, which I had realized once COVID stopped everything. So it made me kind of look at it through a different lens. And so I remember I was talking to my husband. I said, I'm really kind of at this crossroads. I either need to really dig into my company, market, like we're going to have to maybe hire a person, go market us a little bit more, get bigger clients. And it just wasn't sitting quite right. I was like, and he's like, or what? I was like, or I don't know. And then one of my clients had me plan a meeting, and it called me like 2 days later, and they're like, our CEO wants to hire you like tomorrow, like for a real full time. I was like, well, I don't do that. And they were like, well, but what if you did?
But what do you do?
Yeah, but what if you did? And so I was like, well, we'll talk at the meeting. So I go to the meeting, and we sat down and talked, and they were like, yeah, we would love for you to work for us. You can keep your company, like you can do that. And I was like, well, let's talk about it. And it was another one of those things where it's like, say yes.
See what happens.
Yeah, see what happens. And sometimes you'll say yes and it won't be right. And you'll get into it and you can say like, this might not be my path, or this might not be my path right now. And so you can pivot. And it doesn't mean that you're quitting, and it doesn't mean that you can't go back. But so I do still have my own company, but I did go. So I work full time, but it's wonderful. And it like filled some of the gaps that working for myself, only me, I was really missing. And I don't feel at all like I failed. My company's still there. I don't feel at all like that's a failure. It's just, this is what works better for now. And when that isn't a thing, then I've got this, or I've got something else. And you just kind of learn how to bounce and be resilient and just not give up on something. Pursuit, as Curtis would say. Pursue.
God, you just
pursue,
triggered
right?
me a little bit
You
there.
start twitching. You feel like you need to sprint to the wall.
This may resonate with you. I feel like the more I'm listening to you talk, the more I'm like, oh my God, we got the same person. But you said you could have stayed where it was comfortable.
Yeah.
And the older I get, the more I realize that like I don't like comfort. Like down to like if my furniture in my house has been in that place for too long, I need to move it. Like it's got to go. So I got to paint a wall. I got to move that chair. The angle's not right. Like if it gets too normal, average, I'm like, well, what's next?
Yeah.
And that's always been my personality of like, why not try something? Here's the doors open, like take a step in. And if you want to walk back out, walk back out. And I think that is like, I don't know where that blends with like courage and what you were getting deeper than I could possibly get to where this comes from in me and probably in you too. But it is that like mindset of, I don't know if you've seen that reel going around the internet right now. It's an interview with that Alona Mar, the rugby player. And the woman's like, how do you overcome imposter syndrome? And she's like, I don't have that. And the woman's like, what? And she's like, I don't have that. And she just says, she's like, I have worked for everything that I have. Yeah. And so like I hear people talk about that, but like I don't know what that is for me. And I thought that was such a cool thing because I think it's like imposter syndrome has become such like a buzzword that like everyone's like, oh, well, I must have it.
Yes.
And like there's nothing wrong with being like, I did this. And I think that's where for me, when I try podcasts or I try design business or I try something with this business with my husband that we're doing, or I tried working, like leaving my comfortable corporate job, it has opened up so many doors for me to do other things. Like I refuse to not like know that I'm the one that made that success and made the name for myself. At my old job, I could have stayed and been like, you know what? And listen, no negatives towards that job at all. Like it was wonderful for the time that I was there.
Yeah.
But I refuse to not let me be in charge of what I get success-wise in my future, what pivots I decide I want to make. COVID was huge enlightening for me and a shift in my career and family life as well. But I just thought that whole, and you and I have talked about imposter syndrome. You're like, who? Like, I never thought I'd be doing a podcast.
Yeah.
But like you're doing it, right? And so I think to me, that is just that idea of like, whether you want to call it fake it till you make it or like, forging your own path, whatever you want to call it, like, why not do that? I think there's nothing wrong with 9 to 5, but I think there are just so many people who think like, this is my lane. I'm going to stay right here. This is how it's supposed to be. And stepping out is like wrong or frowned upon or dangerous or risky. And like, hell yeah, it is.
Yeah,
but like
it's all just so like
risk reward, right? Like, what do you want out of life, out of what you give to yourself, your family, to other people? And I mean, like, take a freaking risk, man.
well, and I feel like the mindset is so like, do all of this right, so then you can live this life, and
Live it now.
it's too short.
Live it now.
It's too short.
Yep.
You know, like book the trip, do the, you know,
Yep.
like it's. Don't be frivolous. Don't
Sure.
be totally stupid. But it.
Don't go in debt to book the
Yeah,
trip.
like it's just
Like, do it.
It's why not?
Yeah.
Why not? My mom would always say, like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, literally, what is the worst that could happen? You know, if it was asking a question, it was like, okay, worst thing, they say no.
Yeah. Okay, then what?
Thanks so much. Move on.
Try
Like,
again.
whatever.
Yep.
I do that constantly. I'm like, no, really, what is the worst that can happen? Like, let me actually think that out.
And teaching your kid that skill and demonstrating it to them
Yeah.
is huge.
Yeah. I have one. I have worriers, and again, I am a worrier. Like, it is in my DNA.
We are the same.
Yeah. So I see all these things that I do or that I dealt with, and I see them in my kids, and I'm like, oh, okay, here's everything you need to do to fix this, and then you're going to be perfect. You're going to be totally fine. And then they don't do it. I'm like, what? I'm telling you,
told you
I'm
to do
telling you
this.
how to fix this. And then I hear myself, I'm like, I'm pretty sure my mom or my dad said the exact same thing. Obviously, I didn't do it. Some of it you just have to learn and figure it out on your own. But yeah, why not try it? Like, comfort is comforting, and sometimes there's a season where that's what you need.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And then if you start to feel itchy and you want to try something, like, yeah, give it a whirl. I love it.
Go for it.
Yeah. Go
Nice.
for it. Just do it.
We always
Yeah,
end it
Kim.
more like, are we done?
Is that it? I love it. That was so fun.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unbound Performance Podcast.
Your support helps us continue to build our community. If you're enjoying this content, please like, subscribe, and share.